Hello everyone, I'm Professor Geek. Welcome back to the channel, and welcome to part 3 of my Marvel Civil War series. Once again, if you missed the first 2 installments of this, I will place the link in the top of the video there. It is an older series I did back in 2016 when my video was really just getting traction and starting up, and I was looking forward to the release of Captain America Civil War, the film. So, as looking forward to that, I went back and looked at the Marvel Civil War comic book event. And in the first part of that video series, which you can look at via the link there, I delve into instances throughout Western civilization's mythology when our heroes do fight each other. As I've said a number of times now, it can be overdone, it can be a trope, it can be a money grab, a cliche, but it also can reflect on very important and profound things that are going on in a culture at a time, and it can really serve a culture well when heroes fight each other in mythologies under the right context and whatnot. Part 2 of the series, we looked at the specific anxieties that were going on in the world at the time when Mark Millar wrote the Marvel Civil War event, and then the various other writers who worked on the tie-ins, the individual hero comics tie-ins, reflected on this as well. And then in part 3 here today, it's kind of a bonus. I'm going to look at how not only did the Marvel Civil War comic reflect on the things that were going on at the time, the Patriot Act and so forth that I mentioned in the last video. It was also an interesting sort of meta-critique, or meta-commentary rather, on the Comics Code Authority, the nature of comics in general, censorship in general. This is a theme. This isn't really a central tension, but it's a theme. It's something that's overlaid in there, and that's a mark of good literature, whether it's in comics or prose or whatever. When you can write a story that clearly is speaking to certain tensions, certain anxieties, but it's recontextualizing them, it's doing what it should do with them. But on top of that, there are themes that are layered and interwoven in, and there are more. I mean, we could do a number of videos in the Marvel Civil War comic, but we'll stop at 3 just to for the sake of time here. But take a look at this video and see how this comic, in addition to everything it's already doing, it also makes this commentary on comic book censorship, specifically the history of the Comics Code Authority, but also censorship to come. I mean, we can think about that. That's always an issue, at the forefront somewhat, it ebbs and flows, but that's something that we still think about and talk about today. So an interesting extra little bonus of the Marvel Civil War comic event. So hopefully you'll enjoy this video. It's a little bit shorter, but I'll be back with more of these, more commentaries. I will mine some of these older video series occasionally and put them out, but I'll be back with all the usual new stuff as well. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep enjoying and digging deeper into the hero stories you love.
Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, and welcome to the 3rd and final installment of my series on Marvel's Civil War, Why Our Heroes Fight Each Other. In the first video, we traced the long tradition in mythology back to the roots of Western civilization. We discovered that different heroes stand for different values in a culture, and they come into conflict with each other when tensions arise amongst those values. In part 2, we looked specifically at American culture and politics, and examined how the 2006 comic event Civil War reflected the political climate of its day, and how the coming film will reflect our own. In this video, we'll look into a subtler reflection. Marvel's Civil War also contained a commentary on the history of comic book censorship. In 1954, Dr. Frederick Wertham published his treatise against comic books, entitled Seduction of the Innocent. The book was filled with propaganda and shoddy academic claims that used the more sensationalized horror and crime titles of the day to condemn all comics as detrimental to America's youth. Regarding superheroes specifically, Wertham claimed that characters like Superman or Captain America were examples of Nietzsche's Übermensch, actually un-American and fascistic. Batman and Robin were an example of veiled homosexual programming, and Wonder Woman was a lesbian, inspiring young girls on to too much independence in society. A congressional inquiry on the subject was launched, which fanned the flame of public outrage. Though the official result of the hearing only encouraged the comic industry to tone down their content, publishers saw the handwriting on the wall. While some left the business behind, those that remained banded together to form the Comics Code Authority. The idea was to self-censor and regulate their content before the government decided to step in. The code contained rules such as the following. Policemen, judges, government officials, and respected institutions shall never be presented in such a way as to create disrespect for established authority. And criminals shall not be presented so as to be rendered glamorous or to occupy a position which creates a desire for emulation. The code is mocked today for such strictures and ridiculed for some of the more laughable censorships, like refusing to print Marv Wolfman's name until it was explained to them that Wolfman truly was the writer's name. Through a series of pushed boundaries and challenges, the code became less and less of an authority, until advertisers no longer insisted on the code's approval. It was as recent as 2011, though, before all publishers stopped submitting their issues, and the code became defunct entirely. The extreme attempt to censor the content of comics seems silly by today's standards, but we just might have the code authority to thank for the fact that we still have comics at all, specifically superheroes within them. Given the social climate after Wortham's book and the congressional hearing, it's not hard to imagine government bans or at least a drop in sales that would have driven most publishers out of the business. By the industry acknowledging the public's concern and creating a system of self-censorship, they were left alone and tolerated by parents. Civil War seems to make a correlation between the Comics Code Authority and the Superhuman Registration Act in the story. When Spider-Man is leaving Iron Man's Avengers for Captain America's Resistance, Iron Man tells him, "What you need to appreciate is that there are forces within S.H.I.E.L.D. and the government who would like nothing more than to absolutely outlaw all superhumans. The compromise we offered them was regulating our behavior, because going back to the good old days was never on the table." We could almost apply this statement directly to the Comics Code Authority in the 1950s. In keeping with the other themes and reflections of Marvel's Civil War, the correlation to the Comics Code Authority is complicated. All things considered, there's no clear winner in the philosophical debate between Captain America and Iron Man, and in terms of the reflection the story provides of American politics, it makes no definitive statement there either. So the resistance to the Superhuman Registration Act does not prevail. When Cap surrenders to move the fight from a physical battlefield to a philosophical one, Iron Man appears to win. All of his plans and schemes come to fruition. Yet after Cap's assassination, they fall apart. Public opinion wavers, and through a series of events, a return to Captain America has the Registration Act abolished at last. Likewise, the Comics Code Authority was abolished through a series of events. We've mentioned that comics creators made various challenges and successful attempts to push the boundaries of the code, but perhaps the most important progression wasn't even a challenge on the surface. What is now referred to as the Marvel Age changed the face of comics and set the stage for both the abolishment of the Code Authority and for the Civil War event itself. When Stan Lee and Jack Kirby introduced the Fantastic Four, fans poured into the industry and called for more of such stories and characters. The heroes argued like a real family. They could be petty and insecure, but made the right choice in the end and strove to serve others despite their imperfections. Soon Lee, working with Kirby, Steve Ditko, and others, created more heroes with the same psychological realism to fill out the universe. Iron Man, Ant-Man and Wasp, Spider-Man, they even brought back Captain America, frozen in ice with his 1940s values and philosophy, then de-thawed in the socially tumultuous 1960s. Each of these names and more went on to be key players in Marvel's Civil War. The Marvel Age laid the foundation for more complex and eventually adult concepts to enter comic books from all publishers. In 2011, DC was the final superhero publisher to abandon the code's approval, the same year that saw DC's controversial New 52, which in a way remade the DC universe in what had been Marvel's image. When writer Mark Millar and artist Steve McNiven were tasked to create Civil War, they gave us much more than a shocking comics event. They gave us a piece of art. Though the format forced the story to rush in places, the whole of the work spoke to its time and to its history. And with the release of Captain America Civil War in theaters, we see the story's legacy live on in future adaptations. I'd love to see your thoughts in the comments. Did you catch the subtle allusion to the Comics Code Authority when you read Civil War? What about the commentary on politics we discussed in Part 2, or the function of heroes fighting heroes in Part 1? If you enjoyed this series, click like and subscribe, and let me know what other comics or films you'd like to see receive this in-depth look on this channel. As always, keep enjoying and digging deeper into the hero stories you love. Thanks for watching.